good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you're tuning in to the Growing Our Future podcast. We appreciate you stopping by, and we enjoy bringing the podcast to you. It is always a pleasure to invite subject matter experts on, to invite guests on that are willing to share their experiences, their insights, and their expertise. And today is no different. And I'm excited to get to today's guest because I've had kind of a front seat to his career, and I've got to watch him really grow into this incredible international superstar that he is. And we're going to talk about that here in just a minute. But we're honored today to have Russell Graves with us. Russell is a professional photographer. Russell, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Aaron. It's always a pleasure to get to visit with you. And, you and I getting to be old guys. We've known each other for a long time now.
Yeah, we're young guys. Okay, Russell.
I still feel like a young guy.
There you go. There you go. Well, Russell, we're going to talk about your background here in a minute and this path that led you to this incredible career that you have. But I like to start every podcast with the same question. And that is, what are you grateful for today?
I wake up every morning, Aaron, being grateful for a lot of things. I mean, I'm always grateful, of course, for my health and my family and for the God we pray to. And, it's just happy. And I'm grateful for being an American. But, specifically, I'm happy because I'm about to spend a few days in God's great outdoors. And it's always a blessing to be able to do that and get to share it with people.
Well, everything you just said, I agree with. I'm with you. I love my family. I love a job. I love the fact that we get to share what we do. And I couldn't agree with you more. I tell you, some of the best mental health time I think there is to get outside. And the thing that I appreciate about what you do, by the way, Russell, here's what I want to share with everybody. We need more people to get outside. And I tell people all the time, we need you to go spend more time in that green time. Go get you some of that green time and then share that green time on screen time. Share the great outdoors on the screen. Share it on mobile devices. Share it so other people can get a chance to be a part of it. And boy, nobody does it better than you. I think I
appreciate that.
You're one of the best out there. So you are a professional photographer. You're, as you will tell everybody, you're probably the most famous photographer that nobody knows. But let's walk people through this path and of how you started in high school, how you became an ag science teacher, and then how you landed this role as this incredible professional photographer. Walk us through that.
There's quite a few steps to it, so hang on for just a minute. Yeah, like you said, I started in high school. I had an older brother who joined the Army. I'm the youngest of 5 kids, grew up in the country north of Dodge City, Texas, in Fannin County. Had an older brother who went into the Army, and then he got stationed in Alaska, and he took an old family camera up there with him that my sister had given him. And when he got up there, he wanted to capture Alaska, so he bought a new camera and sent me that old one. And I instantly fell in love with photography. And I fell in love with photography just by taking pictures of the things I saw every day. My grandpa working cows, or deer out in the pasture, or just the woods where I grew up and I spent so much time roaming in, or turtles, or anything I could find. The stuff that I was so enamored with, and the rural lifestyle that I was enamored with as a kid, that's what I started taking pictures of. And I remember one night at the dinner table, my dad slides a Texas Parks and Wildlife magazine across the table to me that someone had given him. And he says, when you get pictures in this magazine, you're really doing something. And so that was what I set out to do. I wanted to be a magazine photographer. And so I kept working at it, kept trying. One of my early successes I had that was starting to validate what I could do. I think it's called Northrop Seed Company, Northrop something. I'm missing a name there. But a seed company that since consolidated into another seed company, they had a joint photography contest for FFA members and 4-H members when I was a senior in high school. And I entered my best pictures, and I won honorable mention in the entire country. And they gave me like $500 for winning. And so when that happened, it was sponsored by the National FFA Association, the National 4-H Council, and then this Northrop King Seed Company. That's what it was called. and I got recognized as one of the best photographers in the country, as a FFA and 4-H member. And so that really encouraged me. And when I was 19, I had my first pictures in a magazine. And when I was 20, I had my first magazine cover. And so when I made money doing that, and I thought, if you can make money and make it doing this, I'm in. But at the same time, I was on this dual track. I wanted to get an education, and I wanted to get an education of something that was near and dear to my heart. And that's rural living through teaching agriculture education. So I was going to college at Texas A&M Commerce, which used to be, when I graduated, there was East Texas State University. I got my degree in there in agriculture education. And when I was learning to become an ag teacher, I was learning the business of photography at the same time, and I was learning how to be a new husband because I got married at 23. I had all these firsts going on in my early 20s, and as fate would have it, I was still learning the business of photography. And in the summer of 1993, the Childress Independent School District said the magic words to me: "You're hired." And so I'd never been out to the Panhandle or Area 1 before, and took a job out there and fell in love with that part of Texas, fell in love with the people of that part of Texas, and fell in love with ag teaching, really. But still love the outdoors, still love photography. So when I wasn't teaching, I was doing that. I'd stay up many a nights, just burning the midnight oil, getting better at the business of photography. And when I was 29 years old, I started making more money as a photographer than I was as a teacher. But here's the caveat: I love teaching high school kids. I love the FFA program. I love doing everything involved with the culture of being a small town ag teacher. So I kept doing it. And eventually, and I knew it would, eventually at some point, all that would run its course. And in 2009 is when I decided I wanted to try to make my primary living as a full-time professional photographer. And so that's when I left the teaching profession. Still loved everything about it, but I was ready for the next chapter of my life. And after 16 years in the classroom, I traded classrooms from one of teaching high school kids to one of teaching adults about the great outdoors and spreading the word about rural Texas, rural lifestyles and the wildlife and the people who live therein, and just have been really blessed to be able to do that and do it for a living and get to experience a backstage pass to everything that's cool, not only in our state but in our nation. But it's been quite an experience, and it's been a fun experience. But again, the best adjective I know to use is I've just been blessed. I mean, it's from a kid who didn't have any formal training at any of it, to have the successes I had, not only with photography and writing, but also, I had some good successes in the classroom. And it's just, I attribute it to those things I learned young and learned through not only at home from my parents and having good mentors there, but also the mentors I had in public school and encouraging me to follow my dreams, no matter the cost. It didn't matter where I was from, that I could achieve whatever I set out to achieve.
That's really good, by the way. And I want to echo something that you said, because you are a professional photographer, but I will tell you that as a classroom teacher, you are also a professional teacher, and you got recognized several times for your performance as a teacher. Do you remember some of those recognitions?
I do. I don't want to sound like a commercial, but I was blessed, on a local or a regional level. I was named Teacher of the Year several times by the Soil and Water Conservation Districts of Texas. The Texas FFA named me Agriscience Teacher of the Year on 3 occasions. I won the HO Sargent Award for promoting diversity in agriculture education, and was awarded that by the National FFA Association. And so, I always had this mindset whenever I went into teaching, and a lot of times it felt like I was swimming upstream because, I had a kind of for Area 1, I had a little bit of an avant-garde view of what agriculture education ought to be like. I remember my compadre, my partner in crime, that we used to both compare notes and whine about the status quo, was Tom Maynard, because he was kind of the same cloth I was. He just saw his vision for what ag education ought to be, and he made his skills and talents fit his local program there in Plainview before he moved on up to be the state FFA director, just like I tried to do in Childress. And luckily for me, I taught in a community that responded to me wanting to do things differently, and nothing wrong with the traditional ag program. I grew up in a traditional ag and FFA program. It was great for me, but just to be able to kind of pave my own path and carve my own niche in the agriculture education industry is really the freedom to do that and the support to do that, not only from a local level and a community level, but frankly, from a state level, from not only from what they allowed us to do with TEA, but also what the Texas FFA Association and the National FFA Association, and just the structure they provided for people to say, look, here's kind of the overall model, but within that model, you can make it whatever you want to. We just want you and the kids to be successful. And that's really that was my North Star that I tried to follow. I just wanted to be successful, because if I could be successful, I knew those kids would be successful, and success followed them as well too. And, I was blessed to have taught a lot of great kids that are now personal friends, and I stay in contact with on nearly a daily basis, a lot of them.
I like what you just said, because if you're successful, guess what? Your kids get to go along for the ride. If we can be successful as adults, and we have that environment of those kids, we get to share that excitement and that opportunity to let them see success and say, here's how you can be a part of this.
Yeah, and in the old saying that a rising tide floats all ships, I mean, that's a little bit of a trite saying, but it's so true. I mean, when one person centric circles keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and then before you know it, you've grown a community of successful people around you.
Very good. One of the things too, and we're going to get into Russell's career here in just a second, but there's some little things I just want to highlight about his background. Texas just had a very successful presence at the National FFA convention. Probably overall one of the most successful presence we've ever had, from a national officer to agriscience fair to contest to the gold stars, the bronze. I mean, we had a great national convention. But years ago, when we started the agriscience fair competition, I'll never forget, you were one of the early adopters of the agriscience fair, and you had a lot of the early success in that space.
Yeah, we did. It was, you want to talk about jumping in with both feet and not really knowing what you're doing. That was both a blessing and a curse, because, I've always been that way. I've never been afraid to fail, and hopefully your failure, you don't fall down, you keep falling up. You learn a little something and then proceed over time. And luckily I was able to convince a bunch of kids who, maybe they didn't know what they were doing either, but we were all going to fail in the same direction and learn from it. And yeah, early on, we started competing in the agri-science fair contest. And I remember telling some kids one time that they won the state contest early on, like 99 when that contest first started, 98 or 99, whenever it was. And they were the only ones in their category, and they were going to go on stage and get their state championship banner. And they felt a little guilty about it. And I kept telling them, everybody's invited. We're the only ones brave enough, willing to jump in there and do it. They invited 50,000 kids in the state to be a part of this contest. And you're a winner because you were willing to learn it and take the beating, whatever beating may come, and just figure it out and do it. So honor that. So yeah, we ended up winning, man, I don't know, a bunch of agri-science fair. Even as the competition grew and got more and more stiff, we were able to hold our own for a lot of years, and really up until the point when I decided it was time to move on from teaching, we were still competitive every year in that. So I'm really thankful for that. And the projects we did, a lot of times they weren't typical. When you think about production agriculture kind of projects, they were, a lot of times we were sort of on the cusp of what may be considered traditional agriculture, but it fits within the realm of working lands nonetheless. And so we did it, and the kids were sharp and they learned a lot. And I was proud to take those country kids from Childress, Texas, population 5,500 in the whole county, and be able to take them to a national stage, and they could shine as bright as any kid from anywhere. And so that always made me proud to be able to encourage them and stand there and do that with them.
Well, you did good. And obviously, again, I had front row seat to that. So I don't want to call myself old. I'm just telling you I'm proud. And
no,
I still remember to this day the phone call when you invited me to come and speak at your FFA banquet. And I remember we went out to BR3 Ranch, and I had the pleasure of meeting Miss Mary Lou Bradley. And it's not only the relationship you and I've had over the years, but it's also the fact that, because of that relationship, I got to meet a Texas legend. The Bradley family, and to meet Mary Lou was, that was a real treat for me. So, on a personal note, I just tell you, obviously I'm very proud of you. Congratulations for everything you've done. And also thank you for letting me join you, because that was a great experience for me as well.
Well, you don't remember this, but you came and spoke to my high school when I was in high school at Dodge City when you were a state officer, and I always remembered you coming there and speaking. So I'm sitting there. I don't want to say how old we are, but I think you're a couple of years younger than I am, or a couple of years older than I am, I should say. And so I'm sitting there as a junior, senior in high school, listening to this kid from Boys Ranch, a place I'd never heard of, give a speech that inspired high school kids. And so that's how I remembered you, and just to be able to go through and get involved in the FFA program and see what you've done for the Texas FFA Foundation and how you've blown it up. I know this isn't supposed to be a mutual admiration society podcast, but I've always been pretty impressed at what you've been able to do for the kids of Texas and for the FFA program in general. And so that's inspiring to me. And that inspiration started, back when I was a kid. Didn't know who you were, but I always remembered you when you came to our little bitty school and spoke at the cafeteria in Dodge City High School back in probably, when were you a state officer? 86?
85, 86.
Yeah, that's when it was.
Well, if you ever work your way down into the Metroplex and you're ever at a place near Bartonville, Texas, there's a barbecue place there named Marty Bs. And if you ever get a chance, you'll never forget Marty Bs if you go. It is a show place. Okay. It is a show place. I was so impressed one time while I was at Marty B's, I asked the people that were there, I said, does the owner ever come in here? And they said, well, he's here all the time. I said, well, I'd love to meet him. Is he here today? And they said, yeah, he's out front there. He's working on that rope and dummy. And I remember I looked out there and there's somebody over there and they're sweating and they're down there and they're ratcheting and working on that rope and dummy. And I went out there and I said, excuse me, sir, are you the owner of this facility? And he stood up and he said, yes, I am. I said, I just wanted to introduce myself to you. And before I could say another word, he said, stop. He goes, you're that utterly tickled guy. And I said, what in the world are you talking about? He said, you spoke at my high school banquet when I was a senior. And Marty Bryan is a very successful restaurateur and entrepreneur in the North Texas area. But it was a very similar story that he remembered. And, I just think that God blessed me with those opportunities to cross paths with folks like you, and then to have our paths cross again later in life so that we can provide these opportunities for kids and for adults and for teachers.
It's really the Forrest Gump model. It's that feather floating on the wind. You just never know where that thing's going to float to and the lives you're going to touch along the way. And those lessons that I learned early on with, again, remembering how just a little ounce of encouragement from you and a pinch of encouragement from someone else, and all those things that you hear along the way, it adds up to make that recipe for success over time. And, and then at some point in life, if you're listening and paying attention, then you should be aspirational to be able to be that same kind of person. You should be able to for whatever kind of mentorship, because you never know who's listening to you when you've got whatever platform you have. You never know who's listening, and you never know what kind of encouragement that, maybe the harvest isn't reaped tomorrow, but that seed you plant, it may be a 20 years harvest that's going to make a difference in someone's lives. And I've always tried to keep that in mind, no matter what I do. No matter it's when I was teaching school or taking pictures or writing a story or writing one of the books I've written, or even teaching workshops like I do now. When you've got people's attention, I've always felt it, even if it's 2 or 3 people in the audience, I've always felt a strong need to be able to say something, not only say something that's going to make a difference in someone's life, but listen to what they have to say too, because they may have something to say that's going to make a difference in your life. And they may not even mean it that way, but just the way you hear it, it just may be the way it touches you that day that's going to blow that feather in a little bit different path, and it's going to change your destiny forever.
Well, I got to tell you, this is one reason I like doing these podcasts right here, because I could come in here and ask you for specific tips and say, tell me about this, 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 and this. But I don't have to do that, because you sharing your testimony, you sharing your story, you're giving us all these little nuggets of gold of, this is how I approach this. This is why I approached it this way. This is why I encourage my students. This is why I share this with adults. And that's the beauty of hearing somebody's story, is if you'll just, like you said, listen, you're going to find nuggets of gold in their story.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I used to tell my high school kids, don't try to be someone you're not, because everybody else is taken. Just be yourself, and to be who you are is good enough. And, you know, and with that in mind, that's why I just try to listen to what everybody around me has to say, because, you know, you're going to learn something.
So let's get to the profession of photography. And I don't know
Okay.
that we want to get into the details of equipment, strategy, all that. I did watch one of your videos, and I absolutely loved it because I could relate so much to it. I remember you were talking about how you find your subject matter. And you said, here's an example. And you were on a farm to market road, just driving on a farm to market road out in the country. And there were mule deer and a covey of quail. And I think there might have been a coyote. But it was, to me, it was fascinating that it wasn't necessarily always the setup, which you do very well. It wasn't just the setup. It was the fact that you just got to adventure out. You got to see what's around the corner. And you never know what's around the corner could be the next great photo. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. One of the things that I think really helped me at this point in my life, when I was growing up, you know, I grew up in the country, and it wasn't just, I mean, it's not like I lived way out in the country. I was 7 or 8 miles from town, but it was gravel road, and it was before social media and before the internet. And so I had to make my own fun. And I made my own fun by just roaming around, just looking for stuff. And it was either by on my feet that I was roaming around, it was on horseback that I was roaming around, or it was on our, you know, back in the day when three-wheelers were a thing, on our three-wheeler, or then on our four-wheeler, just looking around. And then you know, so I just love taking a drive out in the country, because if you don't see anything, you still get to take a drive out in the country. And so one of the things I always encourage people, you know, stories, essentially being a photographer, or being a writer like I do, or being a teacher like I still do, you're a storyteller. You're conveying information. And I tell people that do my workshops now that all good stories have the same basic things of a beginning, a middle, and the end. But it's those details that you find in between, and those details that you include in your story, that's the thing that makes it better. That's the thing that makes it rich, and that's the thing that makes people remember it. And that's the thing that gives it some context and makes it mean something to somebody. And so, you know, when I'm out, I just encourage, I do it myself, and I practice what I preach, but I just encourage people to look at the details, look for the little things. And the little things are the ones that you really try to focus on, you know, both practically and metaphorically. And it's those little things that really make the difference on how you tell stories. It may not be a big mule deer standing out in the field, but it may be the way the light's hitting that barbed wire fence and those old T-posts as it's running down a gravel road. Or it may be just the way the kind of the fog's lingering around the live oak trees out in the pasture, that you just happen to be there at the right time. And those moments occur one time in our infinite infinity that we live in. It's never going to be that way again. And the fact that you can be there, and whether you're captured on film or whether you're there to see it and remember it, you can't get those experiences when you're staying in the house and watching a Netflix series, or whether you're staying in the house on social media. I mean, you got to get out there and experience it. And it's always worth the experience. Even when I strike out and don't see anything good, it's still worth the time I spent. I told a guy just the other day, I told him this, because we were doing a workshop, and he was good-natured complaining about us having to get up so early. And I told him, I've never missed one sunrise that I've been up to see. There's not one that I've ever regretted. You know, I wish I'd have stayed in this morning. Every single one of them, I'm glad I got up to see it. And so, you know, again, because it sounds, it's almost too big for me to comprehend. But the fact is that one thing that you're seeing on your time here on earth from your perspective will never, ever, ever, ever happen again. And so you just got to be present and be present to witness it. And I think that same thought process can translate through your entire life. You know, whether you're talking about your family life, just be present and be there when it's time to pay attention, or your professional life, just be present and be there and pay attention and enjoy the beauty that's before you. Because when you enjoy the beauty that's before you, I've always thought it makes it a lot easier to deal with the challenges that invariably come along the way, because you know it's on the other side. You know, with the promise of what's in front of you, you know. And so it's just, that's the kind of things that I've been blessed. You know, I haven't in life, on a general rule, we all have our challenges, but I haven't been faced with any challenge I couldn't overcome. And because it's always the promise of there's going to be another sunrise, and it's going to be just as beautiful, and it won't rain always.
Boy, there's a lot of wisdom in what you just shared. Number one, you've got to get out there and see life. You got to get out and see life, because it's in the seeing life that you're living. And that's what you do. You get out there and you see life. And then because you're living out there in that moment, you're capturing it. And I just think that's fascinating. How many magazine covers have you been on?
I've lost count, but I think I'm pretty accurate when I say this. I lost count at about 550, but I think now I'm probably between 600 and 700 magazine covers for my career.
That's incredible. So
yeah,
people have probably seen your work and didn't know that this was the man behind the camera.
well, that's why I jokingly tell people I'm the most famous photographer you've never heard of, because I don't, you know, I've got a love-hate relationship with social media. I obviously do it because you have to. There's a lot, there's a little bit I like about social media, but there's a lot I don't like. So therefore, I don't really concentrate on having a big following. I'm kind of old school. My social media is picking up the phone and visiting with people, or going by and seeing them. You know, that those one-to-one connections mean much more to me than being followed by 10,000 strangers who I don't know. So yeah, I mean, so in the big scheme of things, as photographers go, I'm not on TV. I don't have a million Instagram followers. I just get out there and work hard every day. I mean, that's kind of what my dad taught me to do. And even though I've had a lot of success in what I do, you know, I'm no important than my dad was. He was a welder by trade. I'm no more important than you know, any job that anyone else is doing. And I constantly remind myself and other people who want to have an ego about what we do is, you know, we're not solving world hunger. I mean, we're just out capturing what we're passionate about, and that's something to be serious about. But at the same time, you know, I've never sought fame, because it's I'm no more important than anybody else. If I get recognized along the way, that's awesome and that's great and it's validation, but it's not what gets me up in the morning.
So I know that I sent you a list of questions, but I think I mentioned that I may have something that just pops up while we're talking that I'm going to ask you about. So I guess a question that I have as somebody who's a professional photographer is, why is photography important?
You know, it became important for me early on as a way to capture those things again that you know, I knew weren't going to be around forever. Like the most iconic picture ever taken of my grandfather that the family still talks about was back in probably 1988, when he was an old man. He was born in 1905, so in 88 he would have been 83, and you know, he died in 93. And the most, you know, to be able to capture things like that, that's why it became important for me as a vessel for remembering and remember what's around us. Even right now, over the past 20 years, you know, God bless Texas. Texas is a popular state, and there's a lot of people coming here, and it's changing quick. And so I know one of these days, for whoever wants to pay attention, maybe it's only my family, but I'll have a record of what life was like being a rural Texan in the whole time when, you know, I was growing up. Because, you know, I tell people all the time, Aaron, my only hustle I've really had in life is trying to figure out a way that a kid from Dodge City, Texas could grow up, could make a good living and raise his family in the same kind of rural traditions and rural lifestyles that I was raised in. I never, not, you know, because I'm in the minority. Most people want to live in the suburbs, or most people want to live in cities because that's where all the people are. I know that empirically, but my hustle has always been, how do I make a good living? How do I do all the things I want to do and still be able to live in a small town and be able to do it like that? And that's been my one hustle. And so when it's time for me to lay my head down for one final time, I'll know that what made photography so important to me is I was able to capture what Texas was like during my lifetime. And hopefully that'll mean something to somebody long after I'm gone, just to see a glimpse of what it was like before, you know, our state started changing so quickly.
That's beautiful. Yeah. And the way that you capture it, I like to tell people, I say, what's the easiest way to revise history? The easiest way to revise history is to not know it. So the fact that we got folks like you that are willing to go out there and help capture a moment of time, a moment of history, because that's what that photography, that's what that image represents. Because like you said, it's only that one moment, but you're going out and you're, like you said, you're telling stories. So you're actually capturing stories throughout the great state of Texas that, you know, that's going to be history that's going to live on because you've done what you've done, not only with your photography, but even with some of the video projects that you've done.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I've just been, you know, I mentioned earlier, I've never been afraid to fail at it. And so I always thought if I fall, I'm going to try to fall up. And so that's always been my goal, you know, even on the video stuff, not knowing what I'm doing, but willing to do it anyway, and willing to realize there's perfection and imperfection. You know, I had to convince myself a long time ago, I can wait around forever. I mean, I'm just like everybody else. I don't like rejection, but I realized a long time ago, I can wait around forever and wait to be really good at it and wait to play the game perfectly. And I'm going to be waiting a long, long time. I mean, you look at somebody like Tiger Woods. If he had waited around to play golf before he became perfect at it, we'd never know who Tiger Woods is. And you can pick anyone through history to look at it that way. Look, I'm not comparing myself to Tiger Woods. I'm just saying for illustrative purposes, anybody that's ever done something substantive in life and is strive to make their mark has never been afraid to fail at it early on. And so that's just the approach I've always taken. I mean, I look back at some of my early magazine writing that I did, and I think to myself, oh my gosh, I sounded illiterate. I can't believe they let me do it. But I was willing to fail at it. And so I guess if my parents taught me anything, it was that. Because I mean, we all learn it at a young age. And I used to try to teach my high school kids this when I taught them. If in fact, I gave a speech at our pep rally one time that's centered around this one topic. If we treated ourselves as young adults and adults, if we would have treated our 2-year-old self like we treat ourselves as young adults and adults, we'd be crawling everywhere. Mm-hmm. Because the first time you tried to walk and you fell down and you listen to the voices around you, you know, no one tells a 2-year-old that, oh, you'll never walk, stay down and crawl around everywhere. We'd still be crawling around. But we knew to get back up. And so somewhere along the way, people lose that instinct that it's okay to fall down, but you just got to get back up and try to walk again. And even now, when I teach these workshops, typically I'm the youngest person in these workshops. They're people older than me. And a lot of them are so fearful of failing at what they're trying to do. And even then I try to tell them it's okay to fail. There's lessons in every failure you make. You just learn and you get back up and you walk. And then one of these days you'll be running, and you'll be running better than anybody else around you. And you just got to keep going and keep moving forward and don't look back.
You've shared so much in terms of words of wisdom, examples of professional and personal development. If there were 3 that just come to your mind, you've given us a lot already, by the way, but let's just say 3. If there were 3 tips that you would tell a high school student or an ag teacher right now and say, you know what, put these in place and they'll help you along life's path, what would you say those 3 things are?
I think the one thing is don't be afraid of hard work. I mean, you look at my hands are different than if you look at my dad's hands, who's spending a lifetime working with his hands, he's missing part of a thumb, he's missing part of a finger. His hands look rough, but they're his hands, and it's a testament to the hard work he spent a lifetime doing. And so I'd say number one, don't be afraid of hard work. Hard work, no matter what your path is, whether it's being a PhD and doing something that degree allows you to do, or whether it's, going to trade school, or whether it's just going out and being a young entrepreneur, there's value in work, no matter what kind of work that is. And so I think that's one big lesson that I try to remind myself of and teach my kids, my personal kids as well. Number two, like I keep mentioning before, there's no harm in trying. If you've got a goal and you've got a dream, make it your side hustle till it become your real hustle. I mean, I still try stuff and fail a lot, but I'm not, I think that if you have a goal in mind, nothing happens. There's no overnight successes. And I think that gets lost too. Things take time. And I have to remind myself of that a lot. Things take time, things take effort, things take consistency, and you just got to keep after it. So again, second part, if you've got a goal in mind, do whatever it takes to work towards that goal and be successful at it. And really, I think one of the things I've learned as I've got older is a pretty simple concept, that windshields are made bigger than rear view mirrors for one specific reason. When we're driving down the road of life, we're not supposed to look backwards. We're supposed to keep looking forward. And as I've gotten older, that's a lesson I've learned over time, that no matter what might have happened when I was 20 years old, or what might have happened yesterday, there's still a big, wide world ahead of me. I just got to keep looking forward and keep moving forward, and respect the past, honor the past, but it's all right in front of us, and just go out there and get it.
You know what? For a photographer, that's a pretty good analogy. Focus on the future. I like that. Focus on the future.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. Great analogy. Hey, by the way, I learned that, working at Boys Ranch, about looking backward. They had me drive the tractor once, and I want to make sure you hear this story correctly. Once. And I said, what do I do? And they said, well, you go down, you just go to this marker, then you turn around, you come back to this marker. And they had bought some really fancy tractors, and they had like air conditioning in them and a radio. And I got pretty comfortable. And before long, the hum of the tractor, and I kind of snoozed, kind of fell asleep. And I remember all of a sudden I woke up and I looked, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm off track. And so I real gently kind of pulled the tractor back over on its mark. Well, once I got the tractor back on its mark, I figured, well, I got to look and see how bad I screwed up. So I didn't realize that my neck was connected to my arm. So when I looked back, I pulled the thing again. And I learned that lesson about looking back. That lesson is exactly spot on. Stay looking forward. And you try to get to the goal.
It's a good one.
Well, listen, Russell, thank you for your time. We, again, I think what's so cool about these interviews is that people share their testimony, and in their story, there are just these nuggets of gold, these opportunities, the stories of overcoming. I wasn't afraid to fail, that I was willing to try something different, that even to this day, I'm willing to try something new. I mean, I can't wait to see us write a curriculum out of everything that you shared today, just a study guide, because there's so much there that you shared. And the fact that you saw the world from a different perspective. I think as an educator, you were successful as an educator because that you embrace this concept of creativity. You embrace the idea of what if. One of the things that I tell young student teachers, I always tell them, it takes three things to be a successful teacher. Number one, do your job. And they look at me and they think, well, of course I'm going to do my job. I said, no, you better listen to what I say. If your principal says don't dot I's, don't cross T's, and staple in the top right-hand corner, you better not dot, cross, and you better staple in the top right-hand corner. You're going to be looking for another job. Number two, have mentors, have people around you that give you the kind of insights that you shared today. And lastly, number three, think big. Because if you can't think big, you can't teach big. If you can't think big, you can't inspire big. And if you can't think big, your kids can never be big. And your testimony, in my opinion, is exactly that. You did your job, you had mentors, and you thought big. And because you did, your students thought big. And they accomplished big things because they were inspired and mentored to do so. So I want to congratulate you on your career.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And we'll tell everybody where it's russellgraves.com, I believe, photography. Is that correct?
Yeah, I got a couple of sites, russellgraves.com and then wildlifephotoshow.com. The Wildlife Photo Show is more meant for the people who want to learn stuff. That's where they can go and see videos, see webinars I've done, hear about upcoming things I've got going on, whether it's a speaking event somewhere or whether it's a workshop I may be doing that they can sign up for. So wildlifephotoshow.com is that one. And then russellgraves.com is just my general portfolio site.
Got it. We'll make sure that both of those gets posted in the show notes.
All
right. Well, Russell, you get one last question. It's the question everybody gets at the end of a podcast, and that is a fun question. Tell me, what is the best concert you've ever been to?
You know, I want to keep my Texas citizenship by saying any George Strait concert I've ever been to is the best concert I've ever been to. But one of the most memorable concerts I've ever been to was the first concert I ever went to. And we talked 3 country kids from Dodge City, Texas, when we were 14 years old, talked one of this kid's parents into buying us tickets and dropping us off to see Run DMC in Dallas before anybody in the country knew who Run DMC was. But we knew who they were because somehow we got our hands on an underground mixtape with them, and we found out they were going to be in Dallas. And 14 years old, I saw Run DMC in Dallas.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's probably my most memorable one.
That's great.
But any George Strait concert's been a good one. Long live the king.
George has definitely been the most popular answer when we've asked that question. And it's interesting because we've had everything from Barry Manilow to Elton John to the Eagles. I mean, it's great, but King George seems to be the most popular. Russell, thank you.
Am I the first one to say Run DMC?
And Run DMC.
Is that the first one?
Yeah. I have had Pitbull.
Oh, good.
I have had Pitbull before, so.
Oh, okay. All right. Thanks for having me today, Aaron. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thank you. We say that philanthropy is the giving of time, talent, treasure, or testimony. And today you gave us a little philanthropy. You shared your time, your talent, and your testimony. And we appreciate all the treasures that you've invested in FFA kids. And so we appreciate it.
I appreciate you saying that. Thank you.
Everybody, thank you for tuning in to the Growing Our Future podcast. As we always say, if you want to know what the future is, grow it. To grow the future you want, you've got to plant seeds. You got to take care of them. You got to nurture them. You got to be there in the moment. You got to be intentional. You got to do everything that this man said today. He talked about how to make an incredible career, and that's what this podcast is about. It's about the future, growing our future. And today you got some of those seeds of greatness. We hope everybody will stay safe. We'll see you at the next podcast episode. Until then, go out and do something great, do something for somebody else, and continue to make your community, state, and country the best place in the world to live. Thank you, Russell. Appreciate you joining us today.
Bye, y'all.